And they finally had a feel-good story this week with Jason Kelce. And I'm going to ask Angelo Cataldi this question because he's seen them all. You know, Bednarik was a representation of that city because back, as I told you guys, Bednarik was a representation of the league along with other Mike linebackers. Niski in Green Bay, Huff in New York, Butkus in Chicago, and Bednarik in Philly. They were the faces of the National Football League. It wasn't the quarterback. Because you know why? They were the faces of blue-collar workers. Today, it's different. Now you have Kelce, Dawkins, or Reggie White in the last 30 years. Who really wears the face of Philly if you really were to put it on one of those three men? Let's bring in our friend, by the way. Don't forget the Bible, loud. Here it is. And our dear friend with a beautiful tan from St. Thomas. He is Angelo Cataldi. I was hoping that maybe you saw Jeffrey Lurie down there looking for yachts.
Yeah,
down there in St. Thomas.
I saw a whole bunch of yachts when I was down there, Dan, but none of them were big enough for Lurie. He's a billionaire. He probably gets like 100-foot one or something. Now, it was a great trip down there. It was really nice. It was 80+ degrees for 5 days. And I was poolside on Tuesday or Monday when Jason Kelce held the news conference. And my wife and I were watching it on our cell phones. Can you imagine this in St. Thomas? And it was extraordinary. It was so perfect. You know, his 13 years. I'm so glad you mentioned Bednarik because I came here after Bednarik's playing days were long past, but I got to meet him a couple of times, and he'd have this big meaty hook he'd hang out to you, and he had two of his fingers were aiming in different directions. He had busted him on a football field and just kept playing. You know, he played on both sides of the ball, and he was the embodiment of the Philadelphia athlete until Jason Kelce. I think for the Eagles, it goes right from Bednarik to Kelce. All the people in between, there are a lot of heroes, a lot of stars, but nobody embodied the blue-collar, gritty, I'll play no matter what attitude that Bednarik had and that Kelce did. And his final chapter, his last speech, magic, absolute magic. I feel like I'm supposed to be a writer, and I'm listening to him I got to read something to you. Let me read a little bit from this, because this is writing better than I could ever do. And I was trained to be a writer. And he's talking about all these fly-by-night athletes that come into town and bitch about the fans. And this is what he said. He said, these fans have been caring for generations in this town about this team, and they aren't about to accept a bunch of excuses and soft-ass nonsense representing the name on the front of the jersey, something they've invested their lives in. If you don't like what the fans and media are saying as a player, it's very easy. Love them, treat them like your brothers, and go out and play your balls off. Wear your heart on your sleeve, and I guarantee you change those narratives. Wow. It's mind-boggling how great that is. And it's right. It's so right. That guy, Dan, I wrote on my blog yesterday, I said, he's now my all-time favorite athlete in any sport, anytime, any place. He's number one now because he did it all so beautifully, from his resiliency and his reliability to his leadership to the speech at the rally, to the final speech, his ability to communicate with the fans, to connect with them, to channel their passion. Wow, what a guy, man. I hope the people understand just how great that player was, because there's none like him. We'll probably never see anyone like him again.
Have you ever seen anybody more relatable in Eagle history or in Philadelphia sports history?
The thing that blows my mind the most about that is that he's not from Philadelphia. You know, like Hassan Reddick is. He understands Philly. He grew up around here. This guy's from Cleveland.
Hey, wait, Philadelphia, Cleveland? You couldn't. It's like the moon and the sun.
Yeah. I don't. All I know is from when he first got here, there was a little distancing the first year or so. I remember ripping him a couple of times, and but then he settled in and he felt the vibe of the city, and he opened his life up. If you saw the documentary he did on Amazon, um, he opened his life up. He understood the responsibility of a celebrity, that part of the job description is to share your life with the people. You chose that line of work. So it's not an imposition when the media is asking you to talk to them. It's giving you an opportunity to connect with the people that matter the most. He got it. He understood it. He made the most of it. God bless him. And wherever he ends up, Dan, he's not done. He's still going to do a lot of things that we love in our city, because there's nobody like him. He's number one for me.
Angelo, what I took away from it was, in a city like Philly, when you break down like that, you have exception for the exceptional.
Yeah.
And you are going to see that in a different way versus some guy who was an overpaid guy moaning and crying about, hey, this or that. But when you, like you said, when you watch that guy and know what he's done for 13 years, and he leaving pieces of his body all across the country, and you watching him, how hard it is. It wasn't tears of sadness. It was tears of thankfulness.
Yeah.
And it just being like you said, sometimes you're parachuted into an awful situation in an awful city, in an awful organization. I don't think he could have been parachuted in any other place that would have worked for him, because it embodied exactly what you said. He's a walk-on at Cincinnati. He was a walk-on linebacker. People were telling him, the Coach Mudd was telling him,
yeah,
kid, you're not going to make it, really. And all of a sudden, Stoutland gets a hold of him. I mean, it was really an iconic, it was like a soliloquy. It really was, Angelo, not to get too deep on that, but it really come off like that to me.
The thing is, about just before this season started, I did a charity thing with Jason and his wife. We did there was an auction, and they auctioned off a big dinner, and they had like 10 people come there. And Jason was in the middle of this long table, and they brought out special wines, and they had like 4 or 5 courses. And if you watch the guy, you realize that he wasn't putting it on. Like, he wasn't going, this is part of my obligation, so I'll do it. He put himself into it. He shared stories. He was interesting and funny, and at no point, and then at the end, everybody wanted their own pictures with him, and he was so patient and funny with them, and it was just, it's like he belonged here. It's like, this is the perfect place for him. It's like you just said, like, you couldn't ask for a better combination of his personality and the city of Philadelphia, and he made the most of it. Yeah. And the one other thing, when people are talking about him, look, we deal with a lot of guys. Look at what's going on right now with Ben Simmons, right? Ben Simmons is out for the season again.
Of course.
And Ben Simmons never enjoyed playing basketball. He never liked it. He liked the money, and he liked the perks of it, but he didn't want to be a celebrity. He didn't want to answer questions. He didn't want to do anything, all right? This guy does all of it, and he does it with a smile. And the part that's I'm going to remember most about him is how much he loved playing. Did he love going on that field? Did he love putting that helmet on and slamming his undersized body against that 350-pound nose tackle? And he did it. My wife said something to me. She was really into this whole story. She went, what's going to happen now to the tush push? Yeah. Was it because, were they so great at it because Kelce was so quick off right up, he centered it, boom, he was
I think it's gone.
Is it going to work that way with Cam Jurgens? I doubt it. I don't think so. Dan, I just, I don't, normally when I come on your show, I'm ripping somebody. But this guy, this is an honor to be talking about him in this week. It's an honor. It really is.
Absolutely. You know, it's almost like a Cal Ripken kind of guy, how Cal fit into Baltimore and how Gwynn fit into San Diego or
Yeah,
Kelce fit in, Ryan Sandberg fit in Chicago. That's
right.
kind of what that reminds me of, right, Angelo? Is that
Exactly.
some guys personify the cities they play in.
Exactly. And your comparison with Bednarik was so perfect because most people are not around now that got to see him, so they don't know how much he sacrificed to be this great player and win his championship. And I guess he won a couple of them, but he won in 60. I know that.
Yeah.
And the thing about him, those kind of guys, there aren't that many now. There aren't many left now that aren't tainted by all the money or advice from agents. You know, now, Kelce was, if he had an arm hanging off his shoulder socket, he'd go out there and take the snap. He just wasn't going to miss a game. And I guarantee you, man, having to walk away, even though he's had such a physical toll on his body, that had to be the hardest decision of his life because he loves it so much. He
Well, let
loves
me
it.
ask you this.
Yeah.
Do you think there's going to be a time during the year, midway point, say they have some
Yeah.
injuries,
Yeah.
his passion and his love, because
Mm.
Angelo, the last thing to
Yeah.
go
Yep.
is your love for the
Yeah.
sport. Your body goes first. Is there going to be an angst to want to maybe go,
Huh.
hey, give me a call?
Here's the thing. That's a great question. All right, Dan. Thing is, if the team is going to be good, yeah. And I know he said the hardest part is they're going to ball next year. They're not going to ball next year, right? They're in the downswing now, serious downswing. But if they were in, they had important games to play, and it was half a season to go, and he was watching it and chomping at the bit, I wouldn't rule it out. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but I wouldn't recommend it either. Don't toy with that legacy. You did so much greatness. If you come back after you've been out all that time, are you going to be Jason Kelce, or are you going to be a cheap facsimile? I would hope that he wouldn't do it, but if he did, I would understand it, and I'm sure the people would embrace it because more Jason Kelce is more watching an extraordinary player.
Do you believe with the loss of Kelce and potentially of Brandon Graham, and I know that there's talks potentially of Graham coming back and Fletcher, do you think there's going to be a void of leadership in that locker room after what went down with the coach and everything last year in the back end of that season? Do you think there's an issue with leadership?
Watching Kelce this week, Dan, made me realize how ludicrous the decision was to bring Nick Sirianni back, because you already had a core leadership group of veterans that was second to none in the NFL. You had Graham and Cox on defense. You had Lane Johnson and Jason Kelce on offense. Kelce, maybe the best leader in the NFL, and they still fell apart. Those guys couldn't fix it. They couldn't do anything to stop the bleeding because the coach and the people that were making the play calls and doing all the inside work blundered so horrifically that it was like Kelce proof. He couldn't do anything to fix it. So yeah, there's a void anyway with Sirianni as the coach. Sirianni, I already know what's going to happen. They're going to have a bad year. They're going to win 5 games, maybe less. All right. And then what's going to happen is the fall guy will be Sirianni, and they will have lost a year here of reestablishing a whole new leadership group, reestablishing a coaching staff and all that. This is just going to be a wasted year because they couldn't do what was obvious that they had to do, and that was get rid of Sirianni. So there will be a leadership void. You're right. Graham probably will come back. They'll have Graham on defense and they'll have Lane Johnson on offense, and it won't be nearly enough because they're not going to have a good enough team, and they damn well don't have a good enough coach.
Angelo, this will be my only criticism of Jason and Fletcher Cox and of Brandon Graham. For me, these guys are all endorsing Nick and saying how much they love him in the offseason, how much they care about him, how much they love playing for him. Well, if you loved your coach so much, why did you fall apart at the end of the season and not play harder for him when it mattered? It just seems, Angelo, that it falls on deaf ears with me
Yeah.
when I'm sitting there. I'm hearing you talk, and it seems to be a pattern over there at NovaCare. You're telling me stuff after the fact that it doesn't matter right now. So it kind of falls on hollow ears with me here and shallow ears with me, because I'm not buying that you guys really loved the guy, because if you did, he'd have played hard. Am I off base?
Well, Kelce couldn't have played harder. He played every play, and he just did everything he could. So it doesn't really apply to him. His teammates did not play nearly hard enough, especially as things went bad in the second half of the season. And he clearly couldn't fix that. He couldn't do anything about it. My argument there would be enough players saw how inept the coaching was and simply couldn't respond to it by the time they got to the last 4 or 5 games of the season and things were going bad. It gets to a point where you go, it doesn't matter what Jason Kelce said. They still have Boston Scott on the bench inside the 20-yard line, where he's the best weapon inside the 20 in the last 5 years in the NFL. He's a red zone monster, and they won't use him in that role. And they won't give the ball to A.J. Brown nearly enough. And they won't pick up the blitz, even though it's killing them week after week. There's no leadership that can fix that, Dan. That's such deep ineptitude that if you're a player and you're giving everything you have and it's going nowhere, at some point you stop believing. And that's, I think, what happened in the season. It's insane that they brought Nick Sirianni back, and they'll pay the price in the next year.
They could have as much as $50 million in money to be able to spend in free agency. Angelo, you know the MO of these guys, especially Howie Roseman. And Howie gets pissed at me because I call him a librarian. This guy's hey, believe me, you should. I had Carton on the other day too, and he's like, "You're shaking the room up here." They won't let's get this. Now it's official. Nobody from NBC Philly can come on the show.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Nobody from NBC Philadelphia, because somebody contacted them.
Another badge of honor. Dan, every time they start boycotting you, you got to say to yourself, now I know I'm doing it right. Now I know I'm getting the attention of people who are afraid of the truth. That's all it is. They're afraid of the truth. You're standing there telling the truth every day, and they're going, we got to do something to stop this guy. What are we going to do? We need some more of these butt munchers to come in and say how great
I don't know how they get so butthurt with me saying you can't draft a corner.
Well, he can. That's pretty clear. The thing is, these comments that I make, that you make, that were so obvious, right?
Yes.
They get upset about that. Why? It's obvious. You're not watching the same games we are. Come on. Deal with it. What are you doing?
I just don't get it. Do you think there'll be spenders in this go around? Do you think they're going to spend money?
They are. The decision to keep Sirianni was a decision that what we saw the last half of the season was an aberration. And it was Howie saying, no, I had a good roster. Some went horribly wrong, but I'll bring people back. I'll fill the holes here. Look, I'm not ready to call him a librarian. I think he's built some pretty strong rosters the last 4 or 5 years. He's had a good team, and he's made a lot of good free agent moves, and he made some good trades. I think he's a good GM, maybe a really good one. But he's climbing up a big mountain now because he's got a lot of guys getting old, and he's got a lot of guys who aren't very good that he's stuck with, and he's got a lot of guys who just keep getting hurt, like that Nakobe Dean. You bring in Nakobe Dean, you use a 3rd-round pick, and you say, all right, you got the middle of the field, and he can't stay on the damn field for 3 games without getting hurt. Those kind of players, that's why I love Kelce. He never got – when Kelce got hurt, you didn't even know it. He didn't tell anybody. He just kept playing. Here, there's a lot of soft guys. There's a lot that has to go into the remake of this team. You know how it works. It's cyclical for most teams, and the cycle right now is heading in the wrong direction for the Eagles.
Couple last questions for you, Angelo. Could you see them drafting? And I made this bold prediction. I could see the Eagles drafting a quarterback in either rounds 3 or 4 because, one, they've done it before. When they had Wentz, they drafted Jalen in the 2nd round, and he wasn't drafted to be the starter. He was drafted to be a seatbelt. And they love to hedge their bets over there. That's one thing that they do. Could you now, maybe not a 3rd, Angelo, but could you see them drafting a quarterback? Because that's kind of how they operate. They like to cover their ass, is what I'm saying.
Well, they definitely, I would be shocked if they brought Mariota back. So they'll need a backup.
And he's cheaper on a rookie deal.
They got a kid there now that looked pretty good in the preseason.
Tanner McKee.
Yeah, he's okay. I doubt it, Dan. The least of their worries is quarterback. Just block the blitzers. I keep using this stat because it's the most amazing stat I've seen in a playoff game that they prepared for weeks. 10 times a blitzer in Tampa. The ball was snapped, and he ran directly to the quarterback with no one touching him. 10 unmolested rushes at the quarterback. Name me a guy who's going to survive that. Brady isn't. Peyton Manning isn't. No one is. The quarterback is fine. Get smart coaches around to bring out what he can do. That Jalen Hurts is not the problem. He's the least of their problems. They got everywhere else. They can't cover the pass. How many times were people wide open with the pass? 3rd and 9. No one covering the guy for 15 yards. You fix that problem. Don't worry about that. Put Hassan Reddick out in coverage when he's your best pass rusher. Come on.
Last 2 questions for you. The White House spokesperson, or excuse me, the Eagles spokesperson, Howard Eskin, is telling us that Saquon Barkley could be somebody of interest for the Eagles. So I'm assuming since it's coming from somebody inside the Eagles, you should have heard what Mike Missinelli said. Wow. I know you're in his ass, but he called him a mouthpiece too, and so did Carton and all these guys. And I'm going to take for what it is. He's got to have some insight here. What would you think of a guy? I never thought Barkley lived up to that 2nd pick. No. He's always hurt, and I'm not going to pay $8 million for that.
And I don't think they are either. And you got to understand there's 2 ways you use a mouthpiece. One is you float it out there and see what the reaction is. The other is it's an act of deception. You're doing it because you really have no intention of doing it. But why shouldn't I get the Giants thinking that I am? So they're going to want to spend more money on Saquon Barkley. No, the one thing the Eagles have been pretty smart about is knowing that the running back position has been devalued. The idea that you would spend all that money and do that for Barkley, who you're right, is running backs have a 5 or 6 year. After that, they're not as good. That would be idiotic. It does not sound like that is something Howie Roseman would do, but it is something they would try to float out there for whatever their purposes might be. And if you're going to do that, Howard Eskin's a guy. He's a guy who will just tell Howard something. He'll run on the air with it because he is a mouthpiece for the Eagles. That's clear. It's obvious.
Last question for you. I have to revisit this one with A.J. Owens. And I have to like the way that one thing about A.J. Owens, or excuse me, A.J. Brown, okay? Right. First, he's telling me, Angelo,
right,
he hates the media. He hates all of us.
Right.
We blow things out of proportion. Then he goes on and he sits down and has a fireside chat with the afternoon guys. And one of the afternoon guys gave him a standing ovation after for coming on. And I'm like, a standing ovation. And he's telling, how do you look at him? Is that just the position today?
It is. Yeah. You're Dan. I didn't tolerate a lot of guys like that in my 33 years at WIP, but there weren't a lot of guys that could play like that guy either. I love him. I got it on the field.
You are Jimmy Johnson. Wait a minute, Angelo. Jimmy Johnson says this. He goes, okay, hey, let me tell you something here. You want to be that guy?
Right.
And you want to be a Charles Haley where you're an asshole? Okay, here's the asshole scale. Okay, as long as that asshole scale balances,
oh yeah,
you're good.
Oh no, you're right, and he's a year away from that. But he was ignored in games. He was so much better than any other target. They had Devontae, but he's better than Devontae. He's the best receiver they've had since Mike Quick. You understand? He's better than T.O. And they weren't calling his number. They weren't giving him the ball. So, as somebody who for many years was a malcontent himself, I can maybe connect a little bit with that, Dan. And I'm giving him this year. Now, I agree with you. He's overplaying it a little. There are no standing ovations when I was in a studio. No matter how, that wasn't going to happen with me. But, I guess they were really pleased. I'm sure they were real happy that he called him. He gave them news. He gave them something great to talk about.
Yeah, but me and you would go like this. I don't care if he calls or not. I don't need that guy.
Well, no, you don't. But I want to ignore. Look, there's a reason why he wasn't in Tennessee. He burned a lot of bridges there. This guy is a diva. No one's going to tell you he's not a diva. But if you just keep feeding him the ball and get 100+ yards a game, you're right. The balance is okay for now. Then when he starts doing less and still acts like a jackass, then you got to get rid of him.
I mean, like you said, 3,000 yards in 2 years. Status quo is right there for you.
One more year.
As long as that's still there, we're good.
He's a hell of a football player. He's a great player.
Hey, I'll tell you what, finally here, your WIP guys, man, I mean, that's a hell of a PR room. I mean, those guys really do a great job for the Eagles, man. I mean, if you want to get the Eagle love, man, that's the place to go.
Not all of them.
Did you ask how you feeling, Nick? Who cares?
Not all of them. I
like John Ritchie.
My style was more critical than what they do today, but I'm a dinosaur. I think
me too.
I look to you now. You are the new voice to me. I mean, Dan, you are not afraid of anyone, and my God, do you know football? And whenever you call me, I come right on because
I know you do.
I'm honored to be with you because you do it the style that I did it, and you know a hell of a lot more than I did.
Hold on, I want to tell you this. What your contemporaries around the country say about you coming on.
Yeah,
Mike Missinelli and everyone, they go, how are you getting Angelo on so much?
Yeah.
He doesn't do this.
No.
And I go, I'm hoping it's a Paisan thing first and foremost.
Right.
I go, other than that, I think it's because we kind of see eye to eye with one another and how we.
That's what it is.
How we deliver our content.
It's not, look, it's not money. It's not. I do it because.
Thank you.
When you said Bednarik, I have been thinking all week how, wow, Kelce is the first one since Bednarik who was really that way. And you came right on and said it, and I feel like you're a kindred spirit. You're a guy who thinks the way I did for so many years. And
I want to show you this, Angelo.
Yeah.
As you know, my uncle's Andy Robustelli.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
And Robustelli introduced me to Chuck Bednarik. He comes over, like you said, with this catcher's mitt hand. Come here, kid. He's shaking my hand. He goes, what are you doing here? And I go like this, and I go, I have a picture of you over my bed. And he goes, yeah, what? Of you standing over Gifford, because Gifford was a giant, and I knew who,
Right.
And I go, what did you say to Frank Gifford? Right there in the end of that game, he goes, I said this to him, kid, and always remember, this game is fucking over.
Well, just so you know, Andy Robustelli, those were the years when I lived in New England and was a Giants fan, and I was a big Andy Robustelli fan. So I didn't even know that. I knew you had a big football lineage, but I didn't realize it was that tight. But one other thing I want to just mention, because next Tuesday is a big day for my book. This Tuesday,
one right here, folks.
The audio book is out next Tuesday. It's over 10 hours. It took me 16 to do it. And I know a lot of people don't like reading a book, you could hear me read it to you. And I really enjoyed doing it. And I think you'll enjoy the book. I've gotten so much positive feedback on it. Oh, I got to just tell you, Dan, this last thing. So I'm in St. Thomas, day one, last Sunday, right? And I walk out to the pool and I sit down on one of the chaise lounges. And 4 lounges over is an older gentleman. And he holds up his book.
No way!
It's my book.
Holy shit!
I go over to the guy. I go, I just want to tell you, sir, you have great taste in literature, right? And the guy goes, he looks up and he goes,
yeah, right.
Are you
any place in the world? There you are at a pool, and your boxers there getting ready to take the sun in, and you got this, and the guy, and you look over, and the guy's like this. I could just see the guy going.
It was one of the biggest thrills of my literary life. The guy was reading my freaking book. How great was that? But the audiobook's out next Tuesday if you want it. And Dan, call me when you need me, my friend. I love talking to you.
Thank you so much, my friend. It's an honor to always have you on in our friendship. As for everyone to know, every time something goes sideways, this is what Angelo sends me back. You're working. That's all you have to know. Once you get to people, hey, you have 5 merit badges as far as I'm concerned on your belt right now.
Oh, I'll tell you right now, you'll know you're in trouble when I start boycotting you.
Thank you, Angelo. I
Danny.
appreciate it, my friend. The great Angelo Cataldi. Fantastic stuff. Absolutely. All right, folks, do me a favor. We'll reset my Big Sills 2024 NFL predictions. We'll do that next. Hit the like button. Keep it here, National Football Show.